Hello my crafty friends, this is Monica from Allsewpetite. Welcome to my channel. In this video series, I will demonstrate how to make the Bozena saddle bag. To make this bag, you will need to purchase the pattern from my website. The link can be found in the description box below. In this first video, I will shortly explain how to print and assemble the pattern, what supplies are needed to complete the Bozena saddle bag, and quickly walk you through the cutting and interfacing instructions. But first, let me show you the main features of this bag. Bozena saddle bag is a round medium-sized crossbody bag. The pattern comes with two flap options for different styles of locks. You can either choose a square-shaped flap with rounded corners and press or tongue lock closure. Otherwise, there is a more rounded shape, perfect for a turn lock or similar type of closure. On the bag you will find a nice large slip pocket, perfect to store a phone. On the top of the flap there is a handle that is attached to the handle connectors with D-rings. When you open the flap, you will access the main compartment of the bag, where you can find a zipper pocket on one side and slip pockets on the other side. The main compartment is fully lined and can hold all your basic essentials such as wallet, phone, sanitizer, or your lipstick. There is also an adjustable strap that can be easily removed from the sides, so you can wear the bag on your shoulder or across the body. If you want to find out exactly how to print the pattern and assemble it, then check out my other video where I explain everything in more details. On the first page of the pattern, you will find the pattern layout. Some pattern pieces are larger than one page, and you can see a little diamonds here that will indicate where to match your page. Other pattern pieces are big enough to fit one page, so you can easily cut them out. First, only print the page with the Test Me calibration square to check if your printer settings are correct. Once you have your pattern pages printed, locate the triangle in the center of the page margin and trim the page along that margin. You can tell whether you are matching up the correct pages by following the numbered and lettered guides in each triangle. So once you find the corresponding page, match them together to create a diamond shape. After you assemble all the pieces, you can cut them out. On the last page of the sewing instructions, you will find the labels for individual pattern pieces. You can print that page as well, cut the individual labels, and once you cut your fabric, you can use them to label your pattern pieces. To complete today's project, you would need an external fabric. I'm using this lovely upholstery fabric for my flap and external slip pocket, and waterproof canvas for the main body of the bag. You would need some lining fabric. I'm also using waterproof canvas today, and a small piece of non-fraying fabric, such as cork, vinyl, or faux leather. Depending on the choice of your fabric, you might need to interface it with some woven interfacing. Even though I'm using a waterproof canvas for my external fabric, I am still going to interface it because it is very soft and drapey. However, I'm not going to do that for my lining because it has enough stability. Additionally, you would need a medium to heavyweight stabilizer of your choice, such as fusible fleece, Decovil light, or foam. I am going to use a mixture of all three in different parts of my bag. I also recommend using Decovil heavy or similar to stabilize the area on the flap just below the handle to stop the fabric from bending if you decide to carry the bag using a handle. You need number 3 zipper. I'm using continuous zipper today. 2.5 centimeters D-rings. 19mm swivel hooks and a strap adjuster. And depending on the version of the flap, you either need a turn lock or a press lock closure. If you like, you can also add a metal tag to the outside of your bag or a care label to the inside. If, like me, you decide to use rivets, then you also need a hole punching and setting tools. You would need some scissors and snips, some pins and clips to hold your fabric in place, a seam ripper just in case if something goes wrong, your favorite marking tools, double-sided tape. An owl would be helpful if you are using a press lock with the square flap. And depending on the style of your lock, you might need a screwdriver. A stop-free glue and multi-surface glue would be useful today. You also might need pliers to help you bend the prongs of your turn or press lock, and also a hump jumper for those bulky seams, and ruler to take some measurements. From the external fabric, cut 2 pieces for the front and back, 2 flap pieces from external fabric. If you like, you can use different fabric like me. 1 slip pocket from external and the lining fabric. To create the slip pocket pattern, you would need to take the main front and back pattern piece and fold it along the dashed line. Just like that. 2 pieces for the front and back lining from the lining fabric. 2 pieces for the lining slip pocket from the lining fabric. Again, you're going to have to use the main lining piece and fold it along the dashed line to create a separate pattern piece. And then cut 2 on fold. You will need to cut 1 lining gusset from the lining fabric and 2 zipper pockets from your lining fabric. Two handle connectors from external fabric, 2 strap connectors from the external fabric, 1 pocket overlay from the non-fraying fabric, 1 pocket trim from non-fraying fabric, 1 handle from external fabric, 1 strap from external fabric, and 1 gusset piece from external fabric. My external waterproof canvas is quite lightweight and drapey, as you see. Hence, I'm going to fuse the woven interfacing first to the wrong side of the fabric. To cut the woven interfacing, use exactly the same pattern piece that you're going to interface. There are little glue dots on one side of your woven interfacing, so make sure that side faces the wrong side of your fabric, and then use iron to fuse everything together. If you are working with lightweight fabric such as quilting cotton or a fabric that tends to fray a lot, maybe something like linen, then you should definitely use the woven interfacing. Instead of moving the iron back and forth like you would usually do when ironing your clothes, place it in one place instead, hold it there for a few seconds to allow the glue melt, and then lift it up and then move it to another place nearby. And repeat the process till you fuse the entire piece. Because the woven interfacing has a tendency to shift, and depending on the fabric you are using, it may change the shape of the piece. As you can see, I cut my woven interfacing slightly too big. For this reason, I prefer to lay my pattern pieces on the fabric first, roughly mark the shape on the back, so I know exactly how big piece I need to interface. Then I like to interface that big piece of fabric first, and only then cut all individual pieces. After that, you can fuse or baste the heavyweight stabilizer. If you are using a fusible stabilizer, I would recommend cutting it without the seam allowance to reduce the bulk at the seams, especially if you are sewing on a domestic machine. However, if you are working with sew-in stabilizer, then cut the entire piece. I am using sew-in stabilizer for the external front, back and gusset pieces, and I like to cut off the seam allowance from the top edge too, so it is easier to make that final top stitching. I would do that for the front and back, and on the gusset I would trim along the shorter edges. Once I line up and pin the stabilizer, I can take it to the machine and baste it all together within 1 centimeter of seam allowance. But remember not to top stitch the top edge if, like me, you decided to trim off the stabilizer. Normally I would baste it about 2 mm from the edge. However, for this particular pattern I prefer to stitch it about 5 to 7 mm from the edge, especially on the gusset, because I'm going to snip it along the longer edges, so I want to make sure my stabilizer stays in place. Now I am going to prep the flap. I've stabilized the lining side of the flap already, and I use Decovil Light and fusible fleece to add a body to the fabric, but I trim it off 2 centimeters from the top edge. Then I fused a strip of Decovil Heavy and also added another small piece of fleece, so once I sew the entire flap, it can fit my press lock. My fabric is quite thin, and when I omitted this step in the previous bag, my press lock was too loose. There was a gaping and the screws didn't really hold it properly. I've interfaced the outer flap with fusible woven interfacing already, because my fabric frays a lot. And now I'm going to fuse the fleece. Again, locate the glue dots and place it down to the wrong side of the fabric. For this part, I decided to fuse the entire piece, so I can have enough stability even at the seam. I like to cover the fusible fleece with the cloth to protect my iron. I would like to share a tip that I've learned when working with fusible fleece. I like to steam the fleece before I cut it out to make sure it shrinks under the heat before I apply it to the fabric. Otherwise, you may experience some shrinking later on, and the fabric may crease and bulge in some places. If, like me, you have some excess fleece, you can trim it off. Now I'm going to fuse that small piece of fusible fleece, but first I need to find the center of the bottom edge of my flap. Then I can place the fleece at the center, about 1 centimeter from the edge, because I don't really need the extra bulk at the seams, and fuse it to the flap. Next I can take the strip of Decovil Heavy and also fuse it to the flap. To find the correct place, take the flap pattern piece and copy the markings with your favorite marking tool, or you can just measure the distance from the top edge to the first line, whichever you prefer. I like to just make small lines along the sides, but if you want, you can draw the entire lines instead. When you are ready, center the strip of Decovil Heavy between the markings and fuse it to the flap. This will create a nice and sturdy flap at the top, just underneath the handle. But if you don't like that rigid look, you can just skip it. You may also want to consider stabilizing the handle. I use Decovil Light and cut it out without the seam allowance. Do the same for the handle connectors and strap connectors. Please remember to transfer all notches and other markings to your pieces, such as midpoints, press or twist lock placement on the front and the flap, and also the placement of the handle. Depending on the version you are making, you need to transfer only one of the closure placements. I am doing version 2 with the press lock, and I've already marked it on my fabric. To make it easier, I like to fold the pattern piece in half, then line up the folded edge in the center, and using tailor's chalk, I mark both lines. Just like that. If you are making version 1 with turn-knot closure, place the pattern piece on top, line it up on all sides, and mark the dot for the turn-lock closure. You will also have to repeat that on the flap. I have one bag nearly ready here, but before I install the closure to the flap, I wanted to show you first. I've marked this dot using normal pencil, and whatever you use, make sure that you can see the markings till the very end. In this instance, I would avoid using heat or air erasable pens. For the square flap, you don't really need to worry about it too much, because the press lock will be installed to the edge, but you should still mark the midpoint. When transferring the handle placement marking, I would use removable pen, especially if you're going to draw all the lines. If you don't have one, at least mark it at the sides, inside the seam allowance, so you know where to stitch the handle, but it won't be visible after it's completed. It is a good habit to mark midpoints on all pieces, even if they are not marked on the pattern. To find the midpoint, fold the piece in half, and you can use scissors to make a small notch. Repeat that on the other side, and then the remaining short edges. Join me in the next video if you are ready to begin making the Bozena saddle bag. Second video is all about the lining, so we are going to make the lining slip pocket, the zipper pocket with a decorative overlay trim, and we will also assemble all lining pieces. Thank you for watching this video. See you next time. Stay crafty, friends.